This story explores the devastating betrayal of a woman who discovers her husband is having an affair with the last person she'd ever suspect, her own mother. It's a journey through heartbreak, shattered trust, and the difficult path to rebuilding a life after an unimaginable blow. My name is Sarah, and I thought I had it all. A loving husband, Mark, and we were expecting our first child, a little girl we planned to name Lily. We lived in a cozy house with a white picket fence in a quiet neighborhood in Charleston, South Carolina. The air always smelled faintly of saltwater and jasmine, a scent I associated with happiness and peace. My mother, Eleanor, lived nearby, and we were always close. She was my best friend, my confidant, the woman I aspired to be. Mark adored her, and I was grateful my two favorite people got along so well. As my pregnancy progressed, I felt a little more tired than usual, often falling asleep on the couch after work. Mark was understanding, picking up extra chores around the house and making sure I was comfortable. Looking back, I realize I was so caught up in the joy and anticipation of becoming a mother that I missed the signs, the subtle shifts that whispered something was terribly wrong in my seemingly perfect world. My due date was approaching, and the nesting instinct had kicked in with full force. I was busy decorating the nursery, washing tiny clothes, and assembling furniture. Mark was less involved than I expected, often citing long hours at work. He'd come home late, sometimes smelling faintly of a perfume that wasn't mine, but I chalked it up to being around different people all day. Eleanor was a tremendous help, constantly offering to run errands or bring over casseroles. She seemed unusually stressed though, often distracted and on edge. There were hushed phone calls she'd take in the other room, her voice low and urgent. When I asked if everything was okay, she'd just brush it off as typical worries. I worried about her, but my focus was so fixed on the impending arrival of our daughter that I didn't push it. The air in the house, once so light and happy, began to feel heavy, thick with an unspoken tension I couldn't quite place. It felt like standing on the edge of a cliff, unaware of the drop below. One afternoon, I found a small, delicate earring tucked between the cushions of our living room couch. It was an intricate silver design with a tiny sapphire stone, definitely not mine. I asked Mark about it, and he just shrugged, saying maybe it belonged to a colleague who had stopped by. It seemed plausible enough, but a tiny seed of doubt was planted. Then there were the late-night texts on Mark's phone. He'd quickly flip it over whenever I walked into the room, a nervous habit I hadn't noticed before. One night while he was in the shower, his phone lit up with a notification. Against my better judgment, curiosity overriding my respect for his privacy, I glanced at the screen. The message preview was cut off, but I could see it was from E. My heart did a strange little flutter. Eleanor, why would she be texting him so late? And why the secrecy? I told myself I was overthinking, that it was probably just about something innocent, maybe planning a surprise baby shower. But the feeling of unease lingered, a shadow in the corners of my mind. I tried to talk to Eleanor about it, casually mentioning the late-night texts. "Oh, just coordinating some things for the baby," she said quickly. Perhaps a little too quickly. Her eyes darted away, and she changed the subject to the color of the nursery walls. It wasn't a lie, exactly, but her reaction felt off, like she was hiding something. The feeling of being watched, or rather of things being hidden from me, intensified. I started noticing little things when Eleanor visited, a lingering glance between her and Mark, a shared private joke that I didn't understand, an awkward silence when I entered a room where they were talking. It was subtle, easily dismissed as my pregnancy hormones making me overly sensitive, but the cumulative effect was unsettling. I felt increasingly isolated, surrounded by people I loved, yet sensing a growing distance. A secret world they inhabited without me. My perfect picture of happiness was starting to fray at the edges. The tension in the house became palpable. Mark was jumpier, easily irritated. Eleanor seemed nervous whenever she was around, her usual warmth replaced by a sort of forced cheerfulness. I felt like I was walking on eggshells, afraid to ask questions, afraid of what the answers might reveal. One particularly warm afternoon, I decided to go through some old boxes in the attic, looking for baby clothes I'd saved from my niece. Up there, hidden beneath a stack of photo albums, I found a small leather-bound journal. It wasn't mine, and I recognized Eleanor's distinctive handwriting on the first page. My initial thought was to respect her privacy, but the growing unease inside me, that gnawing suspicion, pushed me to open it. What I read in the first few entries made my blood run cold, confirming the chilling possibility that had begun to take root in my deepest fears. My hands trembled as I turned the brittle pages of Eleanor's journal. The entries were dated from several months ago, around the time I first found out I was pregnant. Her words painted a picture of a clandestine relationship, filled with guilt, confusion, and a disturbing intensity. She wrote about stolen moments, hushed phone calls, and the agonizing weight of a secret. It wasn't explicitly stated Mark, but the context, the references to my husband, to our life together, made it horrifyingly clear. She detailed meetings while I was at doctor's appointments, hurried excuses made, the thrill and the shame intertwining on the page. My breath hitched in my throat. It wasn't just a fleeting mistake, it seemed to have been going on for months, right under my nose, while I was carrying their grandchild. The world tilted on its axis. The jasmine scent of Charleston outside the attic window suddenly felt suffocating. My perfect life, my loving family, the people I trusted most in the world, it was all a carefully constructed lie. I don't know how long I sat there in the dusty attic, the journal pages blurring before my eyes. The heat was oppressive, but I felt a deep, bone-chilling cold. It was like being struck by lightning. The world outside continued oblivious, while my internal landscape was utterly annihilated. How could they? How could my mother, my best friend, and my husband, the man who swore to love and protect me, do something so unspeakable? The betrayal was a physical pain, a crushing weight in my chest. I somehow made my way downstairs, the journal clutched in my hand. Mark was in the kitchen making a sandwich. He looked up, a casual smile on his face, and asked if I'd found what I was looking for. Seeing him there, so normal, so utterly unaware that his secret was out, made my stomach clench. I couldn't speak. The words were lodged in my throat, choked by the sheer magnitude of the lie. I finally managed to find my voice, though it was barely a whisper. "What is this, Mark?" I held up the journal, the pages falling open to one of the damning entries. His eyes widened, and the color drained from his face. The casual smile vanished, replaced by a look of pure panic. He stammered, "Sarah, I can explain," but there was nothing to explain. The words in the journal, his reaction now, it was all the confirmation I needed. Tears streamed down my face, silent and hot with her. Mark, my mother. The accusation hung heavy in the air between us. He ran a hand through his hair, looking cornered. "It just happened," he mumbled, avoiding my gaze. "It didn't mean anything." His words were like another blow. "Didn't mean anything." While I was carrying our child, the depth of the disrespect, the callousness was staggering. My perfect world didn't just have frayed edges, it had been entirely demolished. There was no way to salvage anything in that moment. The foundation of our marriage, built on trust and love, had been shattered into a million pieces. I looked at Mark, the man I had promised forever to, and saw a stranger. The pain was too raw, too immense, to even consider his weak excuses. I told him he needed to leave, that I couldn't look at him, not right now, maybe not ever. He didn't argue, just gathered a few things in a duffel bag. His silence a stark contrast to the turmoil raging inside me. Watching him walk out the door felt like the end of an era, the death of a future we had so carefully planned. But the hardest conversation still lay ahead. How do you confront the woman who raised you, the person you relied on for comfort and guidance, and accuse her of the ultimate betrayal with your husband? The thought of facing Eleanor, of seeing her reaction, filled me with a dread that was almost paralyzing. Gathering every ounce of strength I had, I drove to my mother's house. The familiar drive through the oak-lined streets of Charleston felt surreal, as if I were in a dream. When she opened the door, her smile faltered when she saw my tear-streaked face, and the journal still clutched in my hand. I stepped inside, the air thick with unspoken tension. I didn't wait. I held up the journal and, my voice trembling, asked her about the entries, about her and Mark. Her face crumpled. There was no denial, only a flood of tears and a jumbled confession. She spoke of loneliness, of making terrible mistakes, of a connection she hadn't expected. Hearing the confirmation from her own lips was a different kind of pain, deeper and more complex than the betrayal by Mark. This was my mother, the woman who had given me life, who was supposed to protect me, not inflict this kind of wound. The bond we shared, I realized with a crushing finality, was irrevocably broken. Leaving my mother's house felt like walking away from my entire past. The woman I had just spoken to was a stranger, someone capable of an act I never thought possible. The drive back to my now empty house was a blur of tears and fragmented thoughts. How would I do this? How would I bring a child into a world so fractured, so filled with deceit? The house felt cold and hollow without Mark's presence. that the silence was a relief compared to the suffocating weight of the lies. The nursery, once a symbol of hope and new beginnings, now felt like a cruel mockery of the future I had envisioned. I curled up on the couch, clutching a pillow, the physical pain in my chest mirroring the ache in my heart. I was alone, facing motherhood with a broken spirit and a shattered family. But amidst the despair, a flicker of something else ignited a fierce, protective instinct for the little life growing inside me. I had to be strong for her. The days that followed were a blur of pain and planning. I had to make practical decisions, difficult conversations about separating finances and our lives. The emotional wounds were still raw, but the needs of my growing baby demanded I keep putting one foot in front of the other. Friends rallied around me, offering support and a shoulder to cry on, filling the void left by the two people who had caused so much pain. I started focusing on the nursery again, not as a symbol of a broken past, but as the birthplace of a new future. Each onesie I folded, each lullaby I hummed to my belly, was an act of defiance against the betrayal. This wasn't the life I had planned in Charleston, but it was my life, and I would build a safe and loving world for my daughter Lily. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, marked by the scars of the past, but I was no longer the naive woman who believed in perfect lives. I was stronger, more resilient, ready to face whatever came next, with my daughter as my guiding light.